I am recording this because I have a mind of anguish. And sometimes when you have that state, it's good to kind of get things off your chest and share them, pray about them, and let them go because they do fester. I wanted to start by reading Ephesians 1:4. That's probably the only verse I'll read from this morning, but I think maybe you'll be able to relate to this. Ephesians 1:4 says, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves." I was listening to a Bible study from a very famous theologian and evangelist and Bible scholar named Les Feldick this morning. And he was talking about the Corinthians in the Bible. It's a special church that Paul the Apostle had adopted under his wing and ministered to, and how carnal they were. It says low battery, so I'll have to keep it short. But how carnal they were, and how full of the sinful temptations, and even though they were being transformed and their lives were changing, they still had the habits of old and the habits of Adam. And I couldn't help but reflect on my experience as an organist in a church. I was an organist and pianist for 2 years in a church in Cedar Rapids. It was a Lutheran church, and Pastor Phil was the pastor. And I had been so devoted and dedicated to my job. On Wednesday nights, practicing with the choir, and on Sunday morning for one or two services, being there for the church and supporting them with the piano and the organ, music ministry. I probably in 2 years made maybe 10 mistakes that you wouldn't have even heard unless you were musically trained. I took the job very seriously, practiced at home, bought the music for the job, and was close to a few of the congregants, the members. Some of them I just sort of passed and avoided if I could, but they didn't know that I had a problem with them. It's just kind of the nature of being a member in a church, church work. I had not joined the church officially. So I was not a contributor in their tithe, in their offerings, but I did receive a stipend. I got $75 for my weekly work, and that was for coming twice a week and probably spending 3 hours with the church and then practicing my music on the side to make sure it was beautiful. And the Lutherans have a liturgy that's extremely very colorful. Their service, if you've ever been in the Lutheran services, use liturgy throughout the service. So you, as an accompanist, have to be ready at the organ to bring them in. The key has to be set. You have to play and accompany their voices in a very formal way, and it's not easy. But I enjoyed it as a musician. 2 years doing this faithfully, taking very little time off for vacations. My family didn't have any money to go on vacations. So, holidays and weekends, there I was. Okay, fast forward. In a liturgy, you'll have a cantor, and the cantor then sings at the front of the service, and sometimes you'll get someone that can carry a tune and reads music and does well. Sometimes you'll have someone that does not read music, cannot sing, and does not do well, and is tone deaf. Nothing against people who are not gifted in music. And in church, it's not a professional entertainment, so it's supposed to be, to honor God. So I would see past that. Okay, after 2 years of doing this, with working with the other people and the musicians, The church gets an associate pastor. There had always been just a single pastor leading, but now they have an associate pastor. So instead of Pastor Phil, we have Pastor Phil and assistant. We'll just call her Susie. So Susie's now there, and she has done a couple services with me. Is somewhat awkward. She does not follow the protocol quite as well as Phil, being the experienced one. But I'm perfectly fine. I adapt. But then Associate Susie has the cantor leading in the liturgy, who also is very awkward. The associate, we'll call her Anne. Cantor Anne goes up there. She cannot carry a tune. She does not read music. I introduce her singing in a very clear and concise and way that she should be able to jump in and sing, but she misses her entry. So it's awkward. She misses her entry. So I lead again, and come on, Anne, come on, Anne. She finally comes in. She sings her cantor. It's not done properly, but I'm, again, as a professional, you work with this stuff. So she gets done, and on that Sunday, I am flustered. It's not going very well. And the hymn comes up, and the hymn is supposed to be, let's just say, 231. And I do the hymn on the adjacent page, 230. So it's right there. I'm literally playing the wrong hymn. Now, granted, this is the first time in 30 years of music, church music, that I've ever done anything like that. So I'm playing 230, and it's supposed to be 231. So the congregation is looking, but it wouldn't take, someone with a music degree to figure out that I'm playing the adjacent hymn next to it. So I play through probably 2 or 3 verses, and it is quiet, but the monitor is terrible. This church does not have what they call a music monitor, where you can, on the balcony, hear anything that's going on. And of course, the pastor didn't stop and, say, Jane, hello, we're doing 230, not 231. So there was nothing beknownst to me up in the balcony. I am just playing along beautifully. You'd think they would have just gone ahead and sang the hymn 230, but no, they don't. And I don't hear anything that's going on. So, there's this meeting that comes up then from this. And let's fast forward a couple weeks later. I'm asked to meet with the church committee. Oh, here we go. Church committee. So I go meet with the church committee, and they're asking me, how do you think you're doing? And I'm telling them, I think, very well, thank you. And, I've not had a church committee meeting in 2 years to discuss anything. And as a church musician, you're invisible. You're needed, not wanted. You're heard, but not appreciated. It's got to be one of the most unsung department in your music career you'll ever have. Word of warning to anybody with music, just beware of this. And also churches, I'd say after that experience, get yourself a good cassette tape. Get yourself a good cassette tape and play it for your congregation, and they can sing along with you. If you can't respect your music ministers and your musicians in a respectful way, go spend $5 or $6 on a cassette and play it. And when the song is done, turn the cassette off and do your sermons, do your liturgy. After this committee meeting, I sat there, and this associate pastor that had been there no longer than 2 weeks told me that I was fired. Yes, she told me I was fired. And it was due to playing the wrong hymn on her day. Well, this goes a lot deeper. The woman, Anne, the cantor that sang that morning, has a lot of money. And we're talking, dripping with buku bucks. And that's the kind of person that supports a small church like this. Pastor Phil in the Lutheran church in Cedar Rapids had this cantor Ann who was pretty much supporting this church lock, stock, and barrel. And I knew this. So I had wrote him a letter after being so-called fired. And it basically told him that I knew that this church went by the golden rule. And I said that the golden rule is the man with the money makes all the rules. Now, if you know the golden rule, it is do unto others as you would have them do unto them. But word of wise, this church, like so many of them, are so messed up. I remember back when my husband and I were first married 38 years ago, there was a church we belonged to, and we had not been members for more than about a year. And one of the guys, really nice guy, was visiting with us, and he said, Christianity would be really great if it wasn't for the Christians. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh gosh, that is so bitter. That's a bitter thing to say, but it's true. It's true. We need to step it up. We need to step it up, and we need to follow Jesus' example. You just hang on to this bitterness, and you have to accept the apology that you never received. Sometimes we need to accept the apology that we never received from people. I could go on. There was one other incident in this church. Every church has so much to learn and grow from. This same church, I didn't know that it had cameras all over it because it had had some robberies. It had people coming in and stealing things. So it put up cameras, and I didn't know it had cameras all over. So one of the Sunday mornings after church, it had rained that morning, so I wore a trench coat. I wore a trench raincoat to church. I always dressed up. Before I, went into the choir practice loft, I would hang my coats up and put my, scarf around. And I went up, practiced, did the service. After service, it wasn't raining anymore. So I went over to the coat hall, and I got my raincoat off the rain. I'm almost flustered here. I don't know why. To this day, this is probably 4 years ago, and I'm still flustered to think this happened to me. I got what I thought was my raincoat off of the hanger, and I went on home and hung up the raincoat in my closet. About 3 weeks later, I get a call from one of the elders, and he's on the phone, and he says, Mrs. I need to talk to you because we have a video of your stealing one of the raincoats from the church. And I'm like, what? He said, yeah, we saw you walk right up to the coat rack and steal one of the coats from the coat rack at church. And I'm like, what does it look like? And he said, it's a beige trench coat. And I'm like, okay, just a minute. Let me go to my closet and see. So I go to my closet, and here is this raincoat that is too large for me. It is a little different. It had a lining around the collar on the inside that was plaid that my coat did not have. And I got back on and I said, oh my gosh, I see this coat that's not mine in my closet. It might be the one you're talking about. And he said, well, a gentleman said that you stole his coat, and we need to have that returned right away. So I said, okay, yeah, it looks a lot like the one that I had that morning.